plagues sent, because he won't let them go into the wilderness for 3 days to hold their event. Why are you cutting this part out? Where does God tell them to flee when they sacrifice in the wilderness? Why does God then start talking about the plagues for getting them out of Egypt? So when he is briefed on the whole affair and told exactly how it's going to go, how can you say he is oblivious? He clearly was not. And it somehow he was, then did he got himself deceived Samuel? Change the subject all to a totally different matter, I see. But I'll play along with you here. Where was Samuel told he was to deceive? By the way, if you feel not telling your enemies all that you have planned is lying, I disagree there. How do you not know that Samuel was telling the truth about using the heifer for a sacrifice someday? As I said, there was no sacrifice. He just anoints David and leaves. End of story. Wrong. I just found out there is a, quote, calling to sacrifice, unquote. Where does it say there was no sacrifice? Aren't you performing taqqiya, lying for Allah, by saying there was no sacrifice? See, now who's lying? Aren't you lying to cover for your own Bible? Where is in this phantom sacrifice? Where is this phantom sacrifice? Nowhere to be found. What does it say when they came? When they came, not after, and when some sacrifice was done upon their arrival for the quote sacrifice unquote, he at once set to taking out David. As soon as he is done, he leaves. Where is this sacrifice? And furthermore, where does God tell him so perform a sacrifice? And not just say it. Does the sequence of events as presented contain sacrifice? No! What does, quote, and he sanctified Jesse and his sons and called them to the sacrifice, mean to you? What does that mean to you? What sacrifice? There is no sacrifice in 1 Samuel 16, verse 5. The fact is that 1 Samuel 16, 1 to 13 contains no sacrifice, only the pretense. In word of 1, also God pretty much says in verse 3 that it's never going to happen. When he says, quote, and I will show you what you will do, you shall anoint me, unquote. Whether you like it or not, this is deception, dictionary definition of it. And Samuel is well aware, and also, like it or not, there is no sacrifice to be seen in the verse. In verse 3 shows that forewarning, and verse 6 shows that when they came, he got to anointing. Again, where does it say that the heifer wasn't sacrificed? Does someone have to tell his enemies every intention? His every intention? Part 1. Quote, sacrifice someday, unquote. He said he was sacrificing that day and invited them to it, but doesn't actually sacrifice. The only sacrifice is your imagination, you cannot say he sacrificed when the text doesn't say that. 2. The intent was certainly to mislead Saul and the elders as to what was going on. So now you're saying one can deceive without lying. If this is so, what argument do you have against war is deception? After reading it, I discovered that you are wrong by saying there was no sacrifice. For one thing, I just discovered that there is a quote calling to sacrifice, unquote, and you are trying to tell me that that is a lie. How come? Because surely, had there been a sacrifice, God would have said, quote, sacrifice it, unquote. And had there been one, surely the text would mention the event. But he didn't, and it doesn't, leading one to believe that it never took place. And the verse 3 and 6 present the whole of the event. He called them to sacrifice, but when they came, he instead appointed David and left for Ramah. As this is the way the events are laid out. Again, what does, quote, call them to the sacrifice mean if there was no sacrifice, as you keep desperately hoping so you can believe God lies, allowing it so Muslims can lie, as the Quran says? And how do you not know that God, talking of a heifer for sacrifice, wasn't telling Samuel to sacrifice the heifer? Why didn't God stop his prophets and tell them they should just die, as you say they should have? Why does he instead assist them like with Elisha? What about the fact that while he praises, helps, and rewards them, not once does he say a negative word about what they did to deter you from the same? It does make it seem as if they are to follow in this, that they are to be followed in this. And they aren't the only, you have Gideon and Jael and others and though you try to make excuse, God did command in 1 Kings lies to be told. Well, does God send destroying angels to destroy 2 cities instead of changing all their hearts? God only knows. I mean, why does God do that? God only knows. Again, where does God tell people to lie? They seem to lie on their own accord, and the lying, even though it's wrong, ends up benefiting God's chosen, the Jews. But it says in Judges 5:24-27, it says, most blessed among men, most blessed among women is Jael. What about that? My point is, you condemns what people, you condemns what these people did, but it seems in the Bible that these people are praised and never criticized for what they did. So what should I think of you who follows it? Do not have a double standard and act as if you are more trustworthy than me. So what then is your response to all this and to all that? I still say what they did was wrong because they were bearing false witness. But God said to the brothers of Joseph, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. In other words, God works all things to his glory. And nowhere can I find it in the Bible, like in the Quran, where God tells his followers to lie. They seem to lie on their own accord. And even though it's wrong, God uses it for good, usually for the benefit of his chosen, the Jews. So what I'm saying is that if I can't be trusted, neither can you. It's not your fault, it's the Bible's fault. If the Bible tells me it's okay to lie, hey, you know something? I agree with you. But unlike the Quran, the Bible doesn't tell its followers to lie. Those who did lie, or do lie in the Bible, in the old time, with Jehu and all that stuff, like the ones you pointed out, Jehu and all that, lied on their own accord. It was wrong. It broke a commandment, but God used it, like he did with Joseph's brothers. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, to bring about good. And again, I'm still waiting for you to cut and paste from the Bible where the Bible tells its Jews or Christians to lie. Please post it, okay? No response. Part 2. And you say that even though they did it, it wasn't right. My point was God seems to disagree with you in the Bible. He even says Rahab's action was justified. So he flat out disagrees with you in word even. Also, as I said, God himself engages in this deception, and having someone else do your quote dirty work unquote doesn't make you any less involved. So biblically, where are these people and God? 2 liars? Or is war an exception to the rule? My point was, it seems it to me. What did Rahab do? Where was he lying? Rahab was a she, and she lied to some soldiers, telling them Joshua's soldiers weren't in her home when they were. Right, but where is God commanding her to lie? She herself was not commanded, as Samuel, for instance, but but God approves what she did after the fact, and says she was justified in what she did. Where does God tell Samuel to lie? No response. So now I'm not saying Elisha, for instance, didn't lie. He did what I'm asking. He did what I'm asking is, why did God help him? He couldn't have pulled it off if God hadn't blinded the people for him. Another question is, does this mean that this wasn't because of extreme circumstances, Elijah was a liar in general? Is everything he said otherwise in the Bible suspect? Is he now untrustworthy? Are those who followed the Bible then, you also untrustworthy? Where did Elisha lie? Where did he lie? I assumed you to know. It was in 2 Kings 6, 18 through 20. And God helps him do it too. Notice though, that it's not God telling Elisha to lie. All God does is provide the blindness of Elijah's enemies. Again, where does God tell Elisha or anyone in the Bible to lie?